Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. It was late autumn, just chilly enough to pull a blanket tight, but not so cold that we couldn't leave the windows cracked. Our town, Riverview Heights, was a quiet place, tucked against a vast pine forest. Nothing strange ever happened there, or so we believed. That Friday, my friend Daniel invited me, Eli, and Sean over. His house was a split level at the end of a peaceful cul-de-sac, not far from the woods. It was a neighborhood where porch lights always winked on at 7, and everyone offered a friendly wave. Daniel's mom worked the hospital's night shift, and his older brother was away at college. This meant the house was ours, a recipe for pure, unadulterated chaos. We spent hours in Daniel's room, playing video games, launching chips at each other, chugging fizzy drinks, and howling with laughter at silly online videos. The room was cozy, just enough space for his bed, a desk, and the jumble of sleeping bags we'd spread across the floor. We just settled into our spots and dimmed the lights when Eli, closest to the wall, piped up, "Hey, where's my blanket?" Daniel chuckled. "Under your bag, probably. You kicked it off." Eli rustled around, then sat up straight. "No, I swear it was right here." We all looked. No blanket. At first, it was funny. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. We were half watching a funny video when Sean suddenly sat bolt upright. "Okay, this isn't funny. Seriously, where's my blanket?" His voice was tight, and our laughter died. "You guys are messing with me, right? It was just here. I was using it." Daniel flicked on the overhead light. It was like a sudden chill descended, silencing the room. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Daniel's golden retriever, Sadie, hadn't even poked her nose in all night, probably dozing under the living room couch as usual. "So, who actually took the blankets?" Sean demanded. "I don't like this," Eli mumbled. Daniel tried to sound lighthearted. "It feels like some spooky movie stuff. Come on, guys, it's probably a prank. My brother isn't that far. He could have come home." He called him. We tried to resume our fun, but the easy laughter was gone. Eventually, we decided to head to the kitchen for pizza rolls. We were gone maybe 20 minutes. When we returned, Sean froze. "No way," he whispered. His entire sleeping bag was gone. Not just the blanket, but the whole thing. We stood there paralyzed, staring at the empty patch on the floor, as if it were a scene from a mystery. It defied all sense. We had all been upstairs. No one had heard a sound. No one had seen a thing. Then I spotted it. A small, torn piece of gray fabric peeking from beneath Daniel's bed. "Hey," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There's something under there." I crouched down and reached out. The instant my fingers brushed the fabric, I heard a quick, soft rustling, like something shifting fast on plastic. My heart seized. A wave of icy dread washed over me. I leaned in closer, expecting to see the blanket wadded up. But then I saw them, staring back at me from the shadows. I screamed, the others screamed too. We scrambled out of the room, shoving each other in a surge of pure panic fear. Daniel slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it. We stood in the hallway, gasping, trembling. "What was that?" Sean yelled. "Who was that?" "I thought it was your dog," Eli shrieked. Daniel, his face white, shook his head. "I'm here to help with information or answer questions you might have. If there's anything else you need, feel free to ask." Human. The word hung in the air, a chilling echo that sealed off any thought of returning to that room. We hauled our sleeping gear down, creating a makeshift camp in the living room, every light blazing. Sadie, Daniel's golden retriever, usually aloof, pressed close to us, but her constant watchful gaze fixed on the dark hallway only amplified our dread. Sleep was a distant dream. We merely existed in a state of heightened alarm. Around 3 a.m, Sadie suddenly rose, a low rumbling growl building in her chest, her fur bristling along her spine. Her eyes were locked on the black maw of the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Then, a sharp, piercing bark tore through the silence. A faint creak followed, like old wood shifting overhead. Daniel's whisper cut through the air. Someone is here, in the house. We snatched up anything that offered a semblance of protection. A broom, a sturdy metal rod from the fireplace, even a foam toy bat. Huddled together, paralyzed by fear, we simply waited for the first sliver of dawn. When Daniel's mom arrived home at 7, exhausted from her shift, we poured out our story in a breathless rush. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Her face grim, she immediately contacted the authorities. The house was thoroughly checked, every corner examined. The officers offered theories. Perhaps a stray creature had found its way in, or a misguided prank. Or even one of us, sleepwalking, had moved the items without memory. But we knew, deep in our bones, that these explanations were hollow, far from the truth. A week later, Daniel's voice on the phone was strained, distant. They found someone, he told me, hiding in the attic. My breath hitched. This person had been living there for an extended period, possibly months. Investigators believed he'd entered through a hidden crawl space beneath the deck, making the attic his secret lair. At night, he would descend, taking food, blankets, anything he needed. The officers discovered telltale signs, discarded wrappers, empty bottles, even some of our old clothes and items from our backpacks. I was utterly stunned. Daniel added that they had found an object up there, a sharp tool, a hunter's implement, suggesting a deeper, more chilling level of preparedness. He was what they called a frogger, someone who secretly occupies another's home, lurking in unseen spaces like attics or basements, moving only when residents are asleep or absent. They observe, they bide their time, and sometimes their intentions are far more sinister. The police assured us we were fortunate, that he hadn't seemed to notice our presence. But we vividly recalled that night. The piercing gaze, the terrifying discovery beneath the bed. The most horrifying realization was that he had likely been there all along. A silent observer, while we laughed, played games, walked around barefoot, and slept soundly on the floor. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. The attic entry was a simple panel in the hallway ceiling, easily pushed aside with one hand. Now, when I revisit that night in my mind, the laughter, the pizza, the games all fade. What remains is the faint echo of breath from beyond the wall and those eyes in the suffocating darkness. I wasn't always the one to overthink things. That role usually fell to Trevor or Brandon when he disappeared down internet spirals about hidden dangers or unseen threats. I was the one who always tried to bring everyone back to reality, insisting the world wasn't so terrifying, that most people weren't malevolent, that such things simply didn't occur. That was before last summer, before that night when our childhood innocence vanished, replaced by a chilling awareness. It began, as so many of our nights had, like any other sleepover. It was a summer ritual, a tradition we'd held since middle school. Late nights at one of our houses, fueled by sugary snacks, scary films, and silly games like, would you rather face a bear for $1 million? This particular time, we were at Caleb's, a sprawling single-story home on the outskirts of a neighborhood called Brookside Pines. The name sounded grander than the reality. A tranquil area of quiet families and retirees, where children rode bikes as twilight fell and neighbors offered friendly waves to strangers. Caleb's parents were the easygoing type, stocking up on bulk snacks and granting us free rein as long as we kept the chaos contained. His dad, a pilot, was often away, and his mom, a nurse, worked the night shift. That Friday, she departed around 6:30 p.m., winking as she told us not to stay up too late, knowing full well we would. There were 5 of us gathered that evening. Myself, Isaac, Caleb, of course, Trevor, Brandon, and Eric. We were 17, on the cusp of adulthood, feeling the quiet weight of this being one of our final carefree nights together. It was all so ordinary, so reassuring, until the ordinary slipped away. The evening began in that familiar, relaxed way, Pizza boxes piled high, sugary drinks, a few intense rounds of video games, then a scary movie flickering on Caleb's enormous screen. Around 10, someone brought up flashlight tag outdoors, but we quickly dismissed it. The air was thick and heavy, crawling with insects. It was one of those nights where the very atmosphere felt suffocating, a stifling warmth pressing against the glass as if trying to force its way inside. At 11:15, the doorbell chimed. Caleb looked baffled. "Anyone expecting company?" he asked. We shook our heads. He peered through the tiny viewer, then eased the door open. "Oh, it's just Mason, my cousin," he announced. None of us knew Mason well. I'd only glimpsed him a couple of times over the years. He was a few years our senior, perhaps 20. His face always held this strange mix, a sleepy, knowing smirk that left you wondering if he was simply bored or quietly assessing you. "Yo," Mason greeted us casually, gliding into the living room, as if it were his own. "Heard you had pizza." Caleb offered an uneasy laugh. "Yeah, we saved some slices." Mason didn't bother to ask. He simply grabbed a plate and began piling them on while we awkwardly paused our film. He wasn't overtly rude, but it was clear he had no interest in joining our gathering. Brandon leaned over and whispered, "This guy feels off." I just shrugged. "He's just older. Probably a bit out of it." Mason's visit was brief, perhaps 40 minutes. He devoured a good portion of the remaining food, fiddled with his phone, muttered something about meeting others, then left. Caleb seemed unfazed, explaining that Mason occasionally stayed over when things were difficult at his own place. His parents were away, and he had a spare key. It was odd, certainly, but not yet a signal of true danger. We finally settled down as midnight approached. Caleb distributed sleeping bags and couch cushions, and we spread them across the living room floor. The only illumination came from the kitchen light, a faint glow preventing total darkness. Everyone was drifting, half awake, exchanging silly jokes, each trying to elicit one last snort of laughter before sleep claimed us. Around 1:20 a.m., I stirred awake. Not from a bad dream, but from a distinct sound, a soft click thud, like the kitchen's sliding door opening. My eyes fluttered open in the gloom, my heart hammering. For a moment, I convinced myself it was Caleb grabbing a late-night snack. But then I turned, seeing him nestled in his sleeping bag by the couch, utterly still, lost in deep slumber. That's when the voices reached me. Low, muted, two distinct tones. Then the overhead lights blazed on, and the world seemed to freeze. Two figures stood there, both cloaked in black coverings over their faces. One held an object, dark and solid, utterly unlike anything from a film. He aimed it at us and barked, "Up, don't move, show me your hands." I froze, my limbs reacting before my mind could process. My arms shot up, my chest feeling like it would burst. I remember Caleb rising, dazed and disoriented. Brandon gasped, while Eric could only repeat, "Oh my God," again and again. The second individual carried a large bag. He began issuing commands. "Phones, wallets, watch it, everything in the center. Now." We obeyed, not from courage, but because that dark object was fixed on us, and the person holding it radiated a chilling, serious intent. Trevor fumbled his phone, and it skittered loudly across the polished floor. The masked figure cursed, his attention snapping to Trevor. "You think this is amusing? Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors." He even snatched a partially used bottle of fragrance. It was a scene of quiet, unsettling violation, executed with a practiced efficiency that suggested they had done this many times before. Then, something occurred that sent a deeper chill through me than all the fear before. The individual with the dark object turned slightly, a fleeting glance, and Caleb met his gaze, not with panic or terror, but with a strange, unnerving calm. Their eyes locked for just a split second, but it was enough. I said nothing at first, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But then I noticed something else, something undeniable. They weren't even touching Caleb's belongings. His phone lay undisturbed on the couch arm. His wallet remained half tucked in his backpack, untouched. Even his prized sneakers by the door, they ignored them completely. I was lost in a fog of disbelief, until the one with the large bag suddenly unleashed a deafening sound that tore through the ceiling. A cascade of plaster dust rained down like snow. Trevor shrieked. Brandon crumpled into a tight ball. Eric sat frozen, unable to move. Caleb, however, flinched just a fraction too late, as if he had been expecting the explosive noise. "Silence!" the masked figure roared. "I'm here to help with information and answer your questions. If you have another request or need assistance, feel free to let me know." We remained there for an eternity, just breathing, listening, waiting for another terrifying sound that never came. We didn't call for help immediately. Instead, we contacted our parents. They arrived, a storm of fury and terror demanding explanations. Caleb tried to maintain a facade of shock. He claimed he had no idea who they were, insisted they must have broken in, and that we were fortunate to be alive. But his words rang hollow. Not after what we had witnessed. Not after the chilling puzzle pieces began to fit together. "Your cousin was here earlier," Brandon stated slowly, his voice laced with accusation. Then suddenly, masked figures appear. "That's an extraordinary coincidence." Caleb vehemently denied everything. "You're out of your mind, man. You think I'd betray us?" Yet a sheen of perspiration glistened on his forehead. Not the sweat of fear, but the telltale sign of guilt. Trevor pointed at the untouched sneakers. "Why didn't they take those? They're worth more than everything in my bag combined." Eric remained silent, his gaze fixed on Caleb as if seeing a stranger, and I finally voiced the question that no one else dared to utter. "Did you know?" Caleb offered no reply. That silence was more potent, more devastating than any sudden impact. Later that week, we discovered Mason had a history. Minor property violations, unauthorized entry. He had faced consequences before. The authorities were never officially involved in our incident. Our parents, wanting to shield us from legal entanglements, offered their own explanations. They claimed the intruders must have simply been lucky, or perhaps Mason wasn't truly connected. But we knew better. We never saw Caleb again. He transferred to a different school a couple of months later, moving in with relatives in another part of the state. His mother, it was said, simply couldn't bear to remain in that house, haunted by the chilling truth of what had occurred. Sometimes I still awaken at 1:20 a.m. I still hear the faint scrape of the door. I'm here to assist with any questions or tasks you have. Let me know how I can help. It was a deliberate act by someone we trusted, someone we shared laughter with, played games with, someone we had grown up alongside. The most terrifying kind of monster isn't the one who forces their way into your sanctuary. It's the one who opens the door for them and silently watches you endure the suffering. It began as so many youthful adventures do, with a simple sleepover. Nothing out of the ordinary, just 4 girls, an old house, and a borrowed camera. But certain events refuse to remain simple. Not when something unseen lurks in the shadows. Not when it's already captured in the frame before anyone realizes the door was never truly opened. I was 13 when it happened. The age where you still instinctively call for your mom when fear grips you, but you're desperately trying to appear grown up. My closest friend back then, Callie Roth, invited me, Harper, and June for a Friday night sleepover at her place. It was one of those grand, aged houses perched on the edge of a tiny town called Ashmill, a dwelling that seemed to creak and sigh as if stretching in its slumber. Her family had relocated there the previous year from somewhere up north. We all thought it was incredibly cool that she possessed an entire attic space just for herself. None of us knew anyone else with such a private retreat. The attic certainly had its quirks, but not in a sinister way. It boasted sloping ceilings and ancient wooden floors that groaned with every step, along with a single, small circular window at its furthest point. It was perpetually a little cool up there, regardless of the season, but Callie had transformed it, layering a floor with sleeping bags and cushions, stringing up whimsical fairy lights, and setting up an old box television and DVD player to make it feel more like a teenage haven than a dusty storage area. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. And to this day, I can't say if that feeling arose from what eventually unfolded, or if some instinct within me already sensed something was amiss the moment I stepped across their threshold. Callie's mom had whipped up homemade pizza, and with her dad away for work and her older brother Ryan at a friend's, the whole house felt like our private domain. Just us girls, the attic, and endless hours stretching before us. Callie often unearthed peculiar things in that old dwelling. Just weeks prior, she'd recounted finding a collection of faded letters tucked away in a crawl space, hidden inside a music box where the spinning ballerina was eerily headless. It was that kind of house. But on this particular night, she announced a new discovery, her dad's old camera. It was a hefty silver model from the early 2000s, with a tiny digital display and an enormous flash that bleached out every image. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. We were 13, buzzing with boredom and a sugar rush from orange soda and Pop Rocks. We took turns snapping pictures, contorting our faces into silly expressions, posing as supermodels, vampires, or witches, anything that sparked our imagination. The flash was comically powerful, overexposing every shot until we looked like luminous specters, which naturally only made it more entertaining. Callie then dared me to venture into the basement alone and capture a photo in the dark. I barely made it 3 steps before my courage failed. Harper and June volunteered instead, snapping a few hazy pictures near the old washing machine before we all shrieked and bolted when a sudden thump echoed from upstairs. We instantly blamed the pipes or buttons, Callie's ancient gray cat who moved with an almost phantom silence. Laughing off our fright, we scrambled back to the attic, sprawling out once more. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. She said nothing at first, just a furrowed brow, tapping back one photo, then forward again. Wait, she murmured. Who is that? What do you mean? June leaned in. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. But behind us, just beyond the hallway entrance, stood a tall male silhouette, a pale face, dark clothing, simply there. I don't remember anyone being behind us, Harper said, her voice slow. We were alone, weren't we? My mouth felt like sandpaper. Maybe it's Ryan, I offered, a desperate hope. Maybe he came home early. No, Callie whispered, her voice barely audible. He texted me an hour ago. He's staying over. She pressed the button again. The next image showed him closer. Now he stood in the kitchen doorway, just barely behind Harper's shoulder. A profound stillness had claimed his features, yet his gaze, a singular unblinking point of focus, bore directly into the lens. A sudden involuntary sound escaped June as she instinctively drew the fabric of her makeshift sanctuary closer, a thin barrier against the inexplicable. Her voice, a fragile thread, sought to impose a familiar order on the unsettling tableau. This is merely a jest, isn't it? Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. His hand was reaching out, his form unnervingly close to my shoulder, a suffocating closeness that made my stomach churn. He was that close, I breathed, the words catching. How did we not see him? We would have heard him. Callie's voice wavered. He was right behind you. The true panic didn't strike like a sudden shockwave. Instead, it was a creeping chill, like the air in the room slowly thickening, pressing down on us. Our minds frantically searched for any way to deny what we saw. But the images were stark, undeniably clear. He was there. He had been there. I'm getting Mom, June declared, scrambling to her feet. No, Callie gripped her arm. They'll just say it's fake, or let's check the house right now. That's when the depth of her fear truly hit me. Callie, who always dispatched her brother to the basement during scary movies, now snatched a broom and with a grim determination began to lead the way down the creaking stairs. Every lamp, every overhead bulb blazed to life as we scoured the house, peering under beds, yanking back shower curtains, even venturing into the dim garage. The back door was firmly bolted. Every single window was sealed tight. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Profound quiet held her. her eyes tracing an uneasy path across the illuminated pane. A thin, unyielding seam replaced the curve of her lips, her features a testament to some profound, unspoken conflict. The first light of dawn brought Callie's father back to the quiet house, his presence earlier than expected. His hand went straight to the recording device, his focus immediately drawn to its intricate calibrations, as if searching for an answer hidden within its digital heart. But we all saw the truth in his eyes. He couldn't dismiss it as a mere lens flare or an odd technical glitch. Not truly. But the real horror unfurled afterward. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. The older photos on the memory card remained untouched, but every image featuring him had been wiped clean. No one touched it, Callie swore, her voice trembling. I didn't delete anything, I promise. Her mom tried to offer comfort, mumbling about old memory cards corrupting, about pictures disappearing all the time. Yet it didn't feel like a malfunction. It felt deliberate, as if an unseen hand had swept away the evidence, unwilling for us to recall. We pleaded with Callie's dad to take the camera to an expert, anyone who might recover the files, but he simply stated the card was too ancient, too unreliable. That, he declared, was the end of it. Or so it was meant to be. None of us ever stepped foot in that house again. Callie drifted away, finding new friends at school. Summer brought a quiet emptiness to Harper's former dwelling. Months later, June's digital echoes faded into an unsettling quiet. The memory of what transpired that night became a forbidden territory, an unspoken understanding, forged in the crucible of a shared profound dread. But even now, 3 decades later, I still see his face. Not angry, not sad, just there. An unsettling stillness that suggested he was the rightful inhabitant, and we, mere trespassers. I've shared this story maybe 3 times in my entire life. No one ever truly believes it. They offer explanations, a vivid dream, a clever prank with doctored photos, or perhaps one of our dads playing a trick. But I remember the chilling sensation when I saw that last picture. The crushing proximity. The phantom whisper of breath on my neck, though I'd felt nothing at the time. Some things you simply cannot forget. I hadn't even wanted to go to that sleepover in the first place. It was one of those invitations you accept because everyone else already has. And the thought of being the sole outcast is worse than the unknown. The group had buzzed about it for a week. Friday night at Miles' house, a feast of movies and junk food. No parents to rein us in. I barely knew Miles. He attended the same school, sat in a few of my classes. Always quiet, always a little peculiar. Not in a malicious way, just different. The kind of kid who wore a dark hoodie even in the sweltering heat of summer, diligently scribbling in a black notebook during lunch, while the rest of us swapped chips and gossiped about sports. But my friends were going. Jenna, Aiden, Rosie, Liam, and Chris. So I agreed. What I didn't grasp then was that this would be his very first sleepover. Miles's home stood on the farthest stretch of Larkpur Lane, an old 2-story with weathered wooden steps and a porch that wrapped around like a skeletal arm. It was a place that hinted at former grandeur, now worn and neglected, as if forgotten by time. Paint peeled around the window frames. The yellow porch light flickered erratically, and the front yard's grass was mostly dead. His parents, we learned, were away for the entire weekend at some kind of work retreat in Vermont, leaving him alone with money for pizza and a list of emergency numbers. Looking back, that should have been the initial warning sign. What kind of parents left a 15-year-old unsupervised for an entire weekend with half a dozen other teenagers? But we all showed up anyway. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. His living room was shrouded in gloom, illuminated only by the faint glow of a couple of table lamps. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the world. A stack of horror DVDs sat beside a dusty television, accompanied by a large bowl of popcorn and some off-brand sodas. Cool setup, Aiden remarked, dropping his bag with a thud. Thanks, Miles mumbled, standing stiffly by the window, seemingly unsure of what to do next. We all found places to settle. Jenna pulled a blanket over her lap, Rosie sprawled across the floor, and Chris kept cracking loud jokes, attempting to fill the strange, heavy silence. I settled on the edge of the sofa, observing. Miles remained tense, his gaze darting between the front entrance and the dark hallway behind him, as if anticipating an arrival. The initial film, a cheesy horror flick from the 80s, full of exaggerated scares and predictable plots, helped ease the strange atmosphere. We chuckled at the clumsy acting and tossed popcorn during the jump scares. For a brief time, it almost felt like a normal sleepover. The mood shifted dramatically with the second film. It was a slow, black-and-white foreign picture about a spectral dwelling. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. "Everything all right, man?" Aiden asked. Miles blinked slowly. "This one is based on actual events," he stated. No one replied. He continued, his voice low and steady. "Most people imagine spirits making sounds, but they don't. They simply observe. They watch until you no longer perceive them." "All right, thanks for that, Miles," Jenna mumbled. "Just saying," he shrugged. We attempted to ignore his words and finish the movie, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. The room felt distinctly colder. The easy chatter ceased. Rosie whispered something to Jenna, who just shook her head and checked the time. It was barely 10:45. Once the second film ended, Miles proposed a house tour. None of us were eager to explore further, but Liam, ever the adventurous one, simply said, "Why not?" And that got us moving. We trailed Miles upstairs to his bedroom, where a faint scent of dust mingled with something akin to cloves. It was peculiar. The walls were covered with shelves displaying books, candles, and an assortment of odd handmade figures crafted from cloth and twine. Some possessed button eyes, others were entirely eyeless, and a few were missing limbs. "Did you create these?" Jenna inquired, forcing a nervous laugh. Miles nodded. "Yes, I used to craft them when I struggled to sleep." "What are they meant to represent?" "People," he replied. "Sort of." I made an effort not to stare too long. One figure, with red yarn sewn over its mouth, seemed to have shifted. I was certain it had faced one way when we entered, but now it was angled subtly more towards the door. Then he opened his closet. Inside, slumped in an ancient wooden chair, was a towering figure almost human-sized. It was draped in a long black robe, its face concealed beneath a burlap sack. A patch of fabric was stitched where a mouth should have been. The hair wasn't woven yarn, it was distinctly real, brown, stringy, and grimy. "I'm happy to help with your request. Here's the text you provided." "This is the Watcher," Miles declared, a faint smile finally touching his lips, the first I'd seen all evening. "He sees everything," Rosie whispered, her voice barely a breath. "All right, I need to go back downstairs now." But Miles continued. "You shouldn't gaze into his eyes for too long. He doesn't appreciate it." "He doesn't even have eyes," Liam muttered. "He does," Miles corrected, "under the sack." Downstairs in the living room, a heavy silence settled. The third movie played, a forgotten backdrop as everyone stared at the screen without truly seeing it. My eyes kept drifting to the staircase, half convinced I would spot that eerie figure standing there. Eventually, exhaustion claimed the others. Aiden and Chris were deeply asleep, nestled in their sleeping bags. Jenna and Rosie exchanged hushed whispers before finally succumbing to slumber. I attempted to close my eyes, but the image of the Watcher was burned into my mind. A chilling sensation persisted, as if something else in the house remained wide awake. I don't recall the exact hour when I startled awake. The television displayed only a vacant blue screen. The room was utterly still, and an undeniable sense of wrongness permeated the air. I slowly pushed myself up, rubbing sleep from my eyes. The living room lay in shadow, but the hallway light cast an eerie glow. At its edge, a distinct form stood. My initial thought was Miles, but it wasn't. It was taller, leaner, and cloaked in the identical dark robe the Watcher figure had worn, its head obscured by the same burlap sack. The entity remained motionless, its head cocked slightly to one side. I cautiously reached out, nudging Aiden, who stirred but didn't awaken. When I turned back, the hallway was empty. I desperately tried to convince myself it was a dream, that it had to be. I lay back down, my heart pounding, pulling the blanket tight to my chin. But then I heard the faint creak. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. "Did you hear that hush?" she whispered, her voice a thin thread. Jenna was already awake, clutching her blanket like a shield. Miles, we realized, had not returned downstairs. The unsettling footsteps ceased. A moment later, a scraping noise echoed, as if a large object was being dragged across the floor. Jenna, her face pale, declared she wanted to leave. She whispered about grabbing her bag and calling her dad. Chris tried to dismiss her fear, saying she was overreacting. But then, with a sudden, dreadful snap, all the lights extinguished. The hallway, the lamps, even the faint blue glow from the television, everything vanished. We were plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. A collective scream tore through the room. We fumbled desperately for our phones. Mine was utterly dead. Rosie's wouldn't power on. Aiden's remained unresponsive. Jenna's flickered once. A brief hope, then died. From the stairs, we heard a frantic scuttling, like something rushing down. Then it was in the room with us. I swear I felt it. A crushing weight, a blast of icy air, a ragged low breathing close by. Another scream erupted. Someone stumbled, crashing into a wall. I instinctively ducked, burying my head, bracing for something. And then, only silence. When the lights suddenly flickered back on, Miles stood in the hallway, dressed in his ordinary clothes, holding a box of cereal. "What happened?" he asked, blinking as if genuinely confused. "Why are you all so terrified?" No one could speak. Rosie broke into sobs. Chris snapped at him to be quiet. Aiden stood trembling, utterly speechless. Jenna, already outside, texted her dad from the street, and we huddled by the mailbox, waiting. Not a single word was exchanged during the entire ride home. I never returned to Larkspur Lane. None of us did. Miles vanished from school 2 weeks later. The rumor was he had moved away, transferred somewhere unknown. Sometimes, late at night, that hallway still invades my dreams. The towering figure, the burlap mask, the way its head tilted, as if listening to my deepest fears. The most chilling truth was that it wasn't just a doll. It had moved, and it knew I was watching. It all began the summer before 7th grade, a time when I practically lived at my best friend Mia Thompson's house. We were next-door neighbors on Oak Ridge Drive, a tranquil, ordinary street in a town called Fairhaven, Michigan. It was the sort of place where folks still exchanged friendly waves, and kids rode their bikes until the porch lights flickered on. Mia and I were inseparable, our parents often joking that we must have been twins in another life. If I wasn't at her place, she was at mine, and during those long summer months, we were rarely apart. Her house, a charming 2-story blue colonial with white shutters, felt older than mine. Its wooden floors groaned with age, and the creaky staircase made any attempt at stealth utterly impossible. Mia's bedroom at the front of the house boasted 2 wide windows overlooking the street. It was a room brimming with character, yet it seemed to sigh and whisper to itself whenever the house settled. Her parents, Eric and Dana, were always incredibly kind, welcoming me as if I were their own, allowing me to stay over whenever I wished. It truly felt like my second home. That particular Friday night in July unfolded just like countless others. I had strolled over right after lunch, my sleeping bag tucked under one arm and a plastic grocery bag filled with snacks and a spare hoodie clutched in the other. The air hung thick with humidity, carrying the faint, mouth-watering aroma of someone grilling hamburgers nearby. Mia met me at the door, a wide grin lighting up her face, as if she'd been anticipating my arrival all morning. "Finally," she declared. "I was just about to march down and drag you here myself." Inside, the house offered a cool reprieve, thanks to the gentle hum of window units. We spent the day immersed in our usual activities, watching silly online videos, scrolling through social media, painting our nails, and exchanging whispers about our classmates. Dinner with a comforting meal of spaghetti and garlic bread, and afterward, her mom presented us with brownies, still warm from the oven. By the time we ascended to her room, the sky had softened from a vibrant pink to a deep, velvety purple. Street lights blinked on one by one, casting a warm, yellowish glow across the neighborhood. We stayed up late, nestled inside a makeshift blanket fort adorned with string lights, watching a horror movie on her iPad. We paused every few minutes, shrieking at the sudden scares, then dissolving into giggles at our own exaggerated reactions. I distinctly remember glancing at the time when the movie credits rolled, 12:04 a.m., and that was the precise moment everything shifted. "Hey, look!" Mia exclaimed suddenly, pulling the blanket off her head and scrambling towards the window. My laughter from the film's conclusion died in my throat as I joined her. The sight of her face, suddenly drawn and tense, with eyes narrowed in alarm, instantly silenced me. "What's wrong?" I whispered. She didn't reply, simply raised a trembling hand and pointed. Below us, bathed in the erratic flicker of the orange street lamp, a solitary figure moved with an unsettling slowness along the pavement. My initial reaction was dismissive. Late-night strolls weren't unheard of, but he had no dog, no apparent destination. Instead, he paced, a few steps forward, then back, a strange, repetitive ritual, as if tethered to the spot, awaiting something unseen. "Who is that?" I breathed, the question barely audible. Mia shook her head, her answer a silent, chilling no. His attire was all wrong for a casual walk. A heavy dark hood obscured his face, despite the oppressive summer humidity. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. Beside me, Mia's panicked whisper filled the silence. "What is this? What is this?" I desperately tried to rationalize it, to convince myself he hadn't truly seen us, that it was a mere accident, a glance at the house itself. But a cold certainty settled deep within us. His eyes had met ours. We huddled on the floor, breathless, listening to the oppressive silence of the night. After what felt like an eternity, nervous giggles finally broke the tension. A desperate attempt to dispel the dread. "He couldn't have seen us," I insisted, my voice lacking conviction. "Right? Maybe he's just waiting for a ride." Mia echoed my words, but the hollow sound of them betrayed our true fear. I knew with a sinking feeling that we were only fooling ourselves. Then, a sound that froze the very air, a deliberate, slow knock. 3 distinct raps echoed from the front door. Mia's house had no bell. A knock was the only invitation. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. So, with a surge of misplaced bravery, we decided to creep downstairs, to peer through the small side window beside the main entrance. No lights were dared to be switched on. Each creak of the old staircase beneath our weight sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. At the bottom, we pressed ourselves against the door, slowly, cautiously, peeking through the narrow pane. It was him, the same figure from the street, now unnervingly close, his dark form filling the small window. His face remained obscured by the deep shadow of his hood, but his posture, tense, hunched, almost predatory, spoke volumes. He shifted almost imperceptibly, as if sensing our presence. Then slowly, deliberately, his hooded head tilted. His gaze pierced the glass, fixing directly on us. His face, ghastly pale and gaunt, was framed by wide, hollow eyes that seemed to see beyond us into something far more distant and unsettling. That chilling stare, as if he looked through us rather than at us, is etched forever in my memory. We dropped again, a strangled cry escaping Mia's lips. "What is happening?" she gasped, her voice barely a tremor. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Mia's dad, jolted awake by our cries, met us as we burst into their room, breathless, shouting about an intruder. But by the time he raced downstairs, the terrifying figure had vanished. Officers arrived about 20 minutes later, their presence a cold comfort. They scoured the yard, investigated the porch, and circled the quiet streets. but there was no trace of him. No footprints, no vehicle, nothing that indicate he had ever been there. One officer suggested it was likely a confused wanderer, perhaps intoxicated or unwell. But the explanation felt hollow, inadequate. It didn't account for the way he had looked up not once, but twice. Sure, here is the text you requested. Why knock rather than force entry? And that stare, that unnerving knowing gaze as if he recognized us. Understood something we didn't. My parents quickly came to collect me. Sleep was impossible that night. Mia and I exchanged frantic texts until the first rays of dawn finally pierced the darkness. Even now, at 23, living in a different state while Mia has since moved from that house, the memory of that night lingers. Just a few months ago, she shared something that still chills me to the bone. While sifting through old family photographs, she unearthed a picture from her 7th birthday party. It showed balloons, a festive cake, her cousins, and all her friends, including me in a sparkly top and blue shorts. Yet, in the background near the fence, a man in a dark hood stood, his gaze fixed directly on the lens. Mia insisted no one had invited him. Her parents had no idea who he was. When she showed me the image on a video call, a profound chill swept through me. It was him, the very same man. He had been there, lurking in the shadows of our lives, years before we ever saw him prowling the street. Sometimes I still shudder, imagining the terror if we had opened that door, or if Mia's parents hadn't been home. A cold question lingers. Is he still out there, patiently observing? Eternally waiting? I can still recall the feel of the air that night. Warm, utterly still, and thick with that particular hush you only truly notice as a child, on the edge of something thrilling. When I was 10, summer unfurled into endless days, sticky treats and sleepovers that lasted until the earliest birds chirped. My cousin Liam's house became my second home almost every weekend. It was a grander, older place than mine, full of the kind of gentle creaks that turned every game of hide-and-seek into a grand expedition. Unlike my small apartment, his home held true secrets, hidden nooks, dusty attic steps, ancient closets, and a basement with 3 separate storage areas. To me, it felt like a sprawling fortress. In those days, iPads, video apps, or even personal phones were unheard of. Our fun was entirely self-made, and our greatest creation was flashlight hide-and-seek. The rules were stark. No house lights, just a single beam for each seeker, and the hider got a 5-minute head start. We believed ourselves fearless, brimming with cleverness. But we were just children, playing make-believe in a house that held its own, far deeper secrets. Liam's parents were always laid back. His mom, Aunt Rachel, worked the night shift at the hospital, and his dad, a traveling surveyor, was often away for days. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. But around 9 o'clock, as we finished our grilled cheese, Dean casually announced from the fridge, "Hey, I'm stepping out. Don't do anything dumb. Don't set the place on fire." And if anyone asks, I'm upstairs, dead asleep. Liam, I'm concerned, barely glanced up. Yeah, whatever. Dean didn't wait for a response. Moments later, the back door clicked shut. This wasn't a new routine. Liam relished having the house to ourselves. More space, no rules. Dean simply wanted to escape. It suited them both perfectly. And as the visiting cousin, my opinion wasn't even considered. We began our game as always, with a quick round of rock, paper, scissors. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. I didn't stop on the main floor. I climbed all the way to the 2nd level. Liam's house had a strange design, as if it had expanded in stages over many years. The 2nd floor featured an extra lounge, 2 spare bedrooms, and a long corridor that perpetually carried the faint scent of mothballs and settled dust. I slipped into the smaller spare room at the very end. Inside, 2 enormous beanbag chairs sat beneath a grimy window, and an old quilt lay folded on a box by the wall. I squeezed myself between the beanbags and carefully pulled the quilt over me, leaving just enough space to breathe near my nose. The room's door remained slightly ajar. I thought it would make Liam less suspicious. All I had to do was remain perfectly still and wait. but a strange feeling began to prickle at me. A few minutes crawled by. Then I heard a distinct creak on the stairs. Liam, I thought, but the steps were slow, deliberate, almost confident, as if whoever made them wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. The carpet muffled much of the sound, yet I can still trace their path. Into the hallway, then towards the spare bedroom door. The footsteps paused, then entered the room. I stayed frozen, my heart thudding like a trapped bird. I listened with every fiber of my being. Whoever it was, they moved steadily across the room, heading directly for the closet. The closet door groaned open, then another, followed by a chilling stillness. Drawers scraped open, then shut. This wasn't Liam. He never rummaged, never lingered. His hunts were quick, a fleeting sweep of his light before a playful surrender. Then a sound that stole my breath. Liam's voice, a sing-song call from somewhere upstairs. My heart plummeted. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. The silhouette by the desk was no child. He was immense, far taller than Dean, a looming presence in dark clothing, his face hidden within a raised hood. Just as he stilled, Liam's voice echoed, "Closer now," drawing nearer to the room. The man, a silent shadow, melted into the deep corner by the closet, still and coiled, like something poised to strike. Liam's flashlight beam danced into the doorway, sweeping lazily across the room, still engrossed in our game. It flickered over the beanbags. I couldn't tell if he saw me, but I knew I had to act, and quickly. I sat up, feigning a defeated sigh. All right, you caught me," I managed, forcing a shaky laugh as I tossed the quilt aside. Liam's grin was wide. Took me long enough. I scrambled up, walked to him, and casually draped my arm over his shoulder. "Let's grab a snack or something," I suggested, my voice too bright, guiding him gently from the room. The instant we reached the top of the stairs, I leaned in close, my breath a frantic whisper. "Someone is in there. We have to leave, right now." Liam's face drained of color. He didn't question me. We raced down the stairs, through the kitchen, and burst out the back door, sprinting across the lawn to the neighbor's house. I don't even recall knocking. Halpern flung the door open, took one look at our terror-stricken faces, and pulled us inside. We spilled the story in a breathless torrent. She called for help without a moment's hesitation. Before long, the quiet dark outside began to fracture with an insistent, strobing glow. A sudden, jarring disruption then claimed the silence of Liam's home. From the hushed vantage of her living room, we observed the restless, probing shafts of light as they quartered the interior, and the air, once still, now thrummed with clipped, authoritative tones. The agonizing stretch of moments barely settled before a figure was ushered forth, his liberty undeniably curtailed. His visage bore no imprint of our familiar lives, his presence utterly divorced from the comforting echoes of our shared existence on this quiet street. He'd been seen wandering the area days before, asking about discarded items. The officers found a small sharp tool and a utility blade in his clothing. He had no known history of trouble, but the eerie precision of his movements, the way he searched, the unsettling stillness of his presence haunted my waking thoughts for years. Liam never wanted to play that game again, and neither did I. His parents quickly installed a robust new security system. Dean was confined to the house for the rest of the summer, a consequence that felt insignificant compared to the terrifying possibility we'd escape. For me, even now, decades later, I still can't find peace in unfamiliar homes without meticulously checking every hidden space. I learned that night how quickly childhood innocence can shatter, how joy can twist into terror in a single chilling breath. Sometimes, I still picture that man, so unnervingly composed, as if he were simply biding his time, as if this was a familiar routine for him. And I'm left with the haunting question of what fate awaited us if Liam hadn't called out my name. I always felt uneasy staying overnight at other people's houses. My mom called me a homebody, but it was more than that. It was the way strange walls seemed to whisper in the ark, the way shadows morphed into menacing shapes, especially when I was supposed to be asleep. But that particular night, at 13, I made an exception for my best friend Alex. It was a crisp Friday in late October, a night we'd planned for weeks. His dad finally gave him permission to stay up late, promising we'd play video games for hours and gorge ourselves on enough pizza snacks to make us queasy. Alex lived on a quiet road in a small community just outside Asheville, North Carolina. The kind of place with one main route, a solitary fueling station, and street lights that flickered more than they actually illuminated. His house sat at the very end of a peaceful cul-de-sac, bordered only by another dwelling that had stood empty for over a year. Across the road, an overgrown field stretched out, untouched by a mower for what felt like a decade. Beyond his backyard, a dense, ancient forest loomed, dark and tangled even in the brightest daylight. Our chosen sanctuary was the den, nestled on the house's lower floor, a mere whisper away from the glass door that offered a direct view into the dark expanse of the backyard. Alex's father, Mark, lay lost in slumber on the upper level, leaving us to our own devices. This den with our temporary realm, filled with the usual trappings of a forbidden night, sleeping bags, mountains of treats, our gaming console, and a trove of unsettling films we were strictly forbidden to watch. The evening began with a gentle drizzle around 9, which by 10 had thickened into a persistent clinging mist. As 11 o'clock chimed, the sky outside had bruised into a deep, ominous purple, silently ripped open by the occasional, stark flash of lightning. It was then, amidst the frantic button mashing of a fierce video game battle, that the first intrusion shattered our peace. 3 distinct firm raps echoed against the sliding glass door directly behind us. Alex froze his game, his voice dropping to a strained whisper. "Did you hear that?" he breathed. "Yes," I managed. "Was it from outside?" He simply nodded, a silent confirmation that chilled me. We remained rigid, unable to stir. The blinds tightly drawn were a barrier, offering no glimpse of whatever lurked beyond. My heart began a frantic drum against my ribs. "I'm going to check," Alex whispered, rising slowly. "No, don't," I blurted, my voice far too loud in the sudden quiet. But he was already reaching for the blinds cord. I launched myself from the sofa, plunging the room into absolute darkness by switching off the television and the lamp. The den became a void. Beyond the blinds, the night itself seemed to possess a faint, unsettling glow. Each silent lightning strike momentarily bleached the swirling fog, like a ghostly flashbulb illuminating smoke. Alex painstakingly drew back the blinds. There was nothing, only the slick gleam of the wet lawn and the stark reflection of our own terror staring back from the glass. For several agonizing minutes, we remained utterly silent, huddled in the dark, our eyes fixed on the door, as if sheer vigilance could unravel the mystery. Eventually, we flicked the lights back on, resuming our game, a desperate attempt at normalcy, but I couldn't stop my eyes from darting towards the window. We tried to soothe ourselves with hollow explanations. The wind, a stray branch, a scurrying creature. A small, irrational part of me even wished it were Mark, pulling a joke, even though I knew his serious nature made such a thing impossible. It was almost midnight when the sound returned. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. With the interior lights blazing, all we could discern was our own startled reflections. Then, a sudden brilliant flash of lightning tore through the darkness outside. For the merest fraction of a second, he was there. A man, utterly still, unnervingly close to the glass. His form drenched, draped in a dark, heavy hood and thick, sodden boots. His face remained shrouded, but I knew, with a certainty that froze my blood, that his unseen eyes were fixed upon us. Alex stumbled backward, nearly falling over the table, while I was already halfway to the stairs. We didn't stop, bursting into his father's room, yanking him from his sleep-dazed state. Mark, never one to panic, despite being roused abruptly, swiftly retrieved a sturdy object from beneath his bed and a powerful beam of light. We scrambled after him, pulling on our shoes as we rushed outside into the backyard. The porch light flared, casting its glow only on the swaying grass and glistening puddles. Then Alex pointed, his voice strained. "Prints," he whispered. Deep, fresh indentations of heavy boots marred the soft earth, leading directly to the glass door, then sharply veering away. We trailed them across the yard, towards the looming darkness of the tree line. But just before the forest's edge, they simply vanished. The ground hardened, the trail dissolved, leaving behind only the swirling mist, the silent trees, and the distant low growl of thunder. Back inside, Mark meticulously checked and secured every entry point. He instructed us to remain in the den. Likely just someone causing trouble, he muttered. But the tremor in his voice, the grim set of his jaw, told me he didn't believe his own words. Alex and I lay rigid in our sleeping bags, eyes wide, fixed on nothing. The television remained dark, the blinds sealed tight. I felt a chilling certainty, my entire being poised, waiting for the inevitable return. And it came, exactly at 12:15. This time, the raps were softer, almost a caress, yet far more knowing, as if the unseen presence understood we were listening, waiting. Knock, knock. We didn't hesitate. We were halfway up the stairs before the sound had fully vanished. Mark was already awake, fully dressed now. He ordered us to stay put in the hallway, then vanished into the yard alone. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, he reappeared, drenched, shaking his head slowly. "No one," he said, his voice flat. "I checked everywhere. The front, the woods, the field. Nothing." He reached for the phone. Official vehicles cut through the standing water at the cul-de-sac's edge, their lights flashing. They swept the area, took our statements, and offered the same hollow reassurances we already knew. Their presence offered scant comfort. The thresholds remained undisturbed, the air devoid of overt menace. A casual dismissal, a whisper of mundane prank floated from one. Mark's voice, a sudden brittle edge, cut through the calm, pleading for recognition of the profound chill that had settled deep within us. We spent the entire night awake, Mark dozing in the den's recliner, a sturdy item held protectively across his lap. Nothing else occurred. No more unsettling knocks. But I never returned to Alex's house. Years passed, and we still spoke of that night sometimes. Alex would try to laugh it off, saying, "Remember that crazy rainy sleepover?" Yet I could see in his eyes that he hadn't truly forgotten. It wasn't just the knocks that haunted us. It was the precise timing, the chilling certainty of the presence, and the way the prince simply vanished. It was how that man, if he was a man, stood utterly still in a lightning flash, as if waiting for us to see him. And worst of all, that same week, after I told my mom I couldn't go back to Alex's, I looked out my bedroom window late one night. We lived nearly 8 miles from Alex. I could have sworn a dark form stood across the street, nestled among the trees, facing our house. Then another flash of lightning, and he was gone. I was 12 when I stayed over at Riley Martin's house for the first and last time. We weren't exactly best friends. We were more like those summer break companions who just click when school's out, filling long days with bike rides, soda-fueled sleepovers, and silly dares. We'd met at a community pool the year before, sharing pool noodles and boredom, and kept hanging out every few weekends until he moved away that spring. Riley's family didn't go far, just a few hours south from Lexington, to a remote town I'd never heard of called White Hollow. His mom said it was for peace and quiet, but Riley confided that it was mostly because his dad had lost his job and couldn't afford city life anymore. Still, they had a house now, and from the pictures, it seemed far larger than their old apartment. By July, I begged my mom to let me visit him. She said no 3 times before finally giving in. We drove out early Friday morning, winding through roads that felt less like main routes and more like forgotten paths. By the time we pulled into his gravel driveway, I was sweating through my shirt, clutching a bag of snacks I brought for the weekend. Riley waited on the porch in a worn, heavy sweatshirt, despite the oppressive 86-degree heat. He waved at me as if nothing had changed, but his eyes were a little sunken, as if he hadn't slept well lately. "You made it," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Told you it was the middle of nowhere." He wasn't exaggerating. The house sat on the edge of a dense wooded lot with no other buildings in sight. It was a 2-story structure, clearly needing repairs. Its wood siding faded from gray to silver. The porch creaked under our weight like it hadn't been touched in decades. "Dude," I said, stepping back to take it all in, "this place is huge." "Yeah, it looks cool, but it's weird at night," he said, lowering his voice. "I'll show you later." I laughed, thinking he was trying to unnerve me. That was our thing, light scares, horror movies, trying to outdo each other. At the time, I thought he was just setting the stage. I was wrong. We didn't do much that first day. I helped him set up his old gaming console in his room, and we played until dinner. His parents were quiet, polite. His dad, a powerfully built man with imposing hands, barely spoke a word. His mom was softer, nervously upbeat, constantly asking if I needed anything. Socks, bug spray, an extra pillow. I said no every time, but she persisted. That night we made a camp in Riley's room with snacks and a streaming film. Somewhere around 11, I paused the movie. "Hey," I said, "do you hear that?" He muted the television. There it was, a distinct thump scrape, followed by an unnerving silence. It sounded like it came from directly below us. "I'm here to assist with any questions or information you need. If you have another request or need help, feel free to ask. There's no access from inside." "Then what's under us?" "I can't explain it," he admitted, his voice hushed. "We've been hearing strange sounds for days. My dad thinks it's just critters or old pipes, but it doesn't sound like either of those." He gave a single tight nod, his gaze fixed on the floorboards, as if they held some terrifying secret only he could see. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The following morning, after we'd eaten, we ventured outside. The air was warm, and the sky was a restless canvas of clouds, unable to decide if it wanted to be bright or overcast. Riley guided me to the back of the house, where the neat lawn abruptly surrendered to a dense, wild tangle of woods. There was no clear trail, only spots where the undergrowth looked disturbed. "We could explore a bit," he offered, "but not too deep." "Why not?" I asked. He paused, a strange tension in his shoulders. "Just don't want to get turned around," he mumbled. We hadn't ventured far, perhaps 200 paces, when Riley's foot struck something with a dull, metallic thunk. He stumbled, then peered down. "What in the world?" he whispered, sinking into a crouch. I moved closer, seeing what had caught his attention. It was a rusted cellar door, mostly hidden beneath a blanket of moss and fallen leaves. Its iron hinges were ancient, but there was no lock. "I never knew this was here," he murmured, his fingers tracing the cold metal handle. "Dude," I gasped, stepping away. "This is like something from a nightmare." He managed a weak smirk, but his face was drained of color. Despite his clear unease, he tugged the door open. It shrieked, a tortured wail of metal, resisting every inch of its movement. Below, a square opening plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. A fragile, half-rotted ladder clung to one side. The stench assaulted us instantly. Damp earth, decay, and a sharp, acrid chemical tang. Riley fumbled for his phone, switching on its light. The thin beam struggled against the overwhelming gloom, but it revealed enough. A dirt floor, shards of broken glass reflecting faintly, and something metallic propped against the far wall. A makeshift bed, some crude shelves, then a soft clink. Something shifted. Another sound like metal scraping on concrete, but nearer this time. "Riley," I whispered, my voice barely there. "We have to leave. Now." His eyes were wide with terror, but he nodded. Then we heard it, the distinct scrape of hands on the ladder rungs. Someone was ascending. We didn't hesitate. We bolted. The run back with a blur of panicked motion, tree branches lashing at my arms, my lungs screaming for air. Riley's dad was in the garage when we stumbled in, covered in leaves and gasping. He dropped whatever he was working on the moment he saw our faces. "There's someone down there," Riley choked out, pointing frantically towards the woods. "Under the ground." His dad followed us, utterly silent. When he saw the gaping cellar door, he stopped dead, his face grim. "Good heavens," he mumbled. "I thought this was sealed for good." He then turned to us, his gaze stern. We started to protest, but his voice, sharp and unyielding, cut us off. "Inside now, no arguments." Riley's mom met us in the hallway, her face etched with worry. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. They carried powerful lights, utility belts, and a sturdy metal pry bar. Riley and I were strictly told to remain indoors while the three adults vanished into the darkness of the cellar. We waited. 10 minutes stretched into 20. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. I didn't hear from Riley for years after that night. He stopped replying to my messages. His family moved away again. It wasn't until I was 17 that he contacted me out of the blue. "I wasn't supposed to tell you," he wrote, "but I think you deserve to know." My breath hitched as I read his next words. My dad found 3 large, wrapped bundles down there. Old, sealed up. Whoever was living in that space was keeping hidden things. There were empty bottles everywhere, a strange heavy scent in the air, and dark, unsettling marks in a corner. Was the person still down there? I typed back, my hands shaking. "I am here to help with information, explanations, or any questions you have. If you have any other text or topic in mind that you'd like to discuss or learn about, please feel free to ask." We were hearing him. I don't dwell on it often, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the door's tortured shriek as it opened. I still hear the soft scrape of hands on that ladder. And I can't help but wonder what horror would have met us if we'd lingered for just 30 more seconds.